My name is Dr. Caleb Reiner. I'm 47 years old, a geophysicist, a data scientist, a man of reason, research, and ice. I spent the last 20 years of my life studying Earth's southernmost frontier, Antarctica. I led expeditions, published papers, drilled through ancient ice sheets. I believed in evidence, in satellites, in certainty. I never believed in God. To me, religion was a story people told to survive the unknown. I didn't need stories. I had the data, until the day I died. It happened during our final week, at a research base near the Ross Ice Shelf. Our team was running deep core extractions when a sudden crevasse opened beneath our tracked vehicle. The snow beneath us collapsed. We dropped. The last thing I remember was the sound of cracking ice and my own breath freezing mid-gasp. And then silence. I was no longer in the cold, no longer in my body. I was somewhere else. Everything around me glowed, yet there was no sun. I felt light not just on my skin, but in my thoughts. I was aware, conscious, alive, but not on Earth. And then I saw him, a man radiant, strong, kind beyond comprehension. Jesus. He stood before me, no mythical, not religious, not distant, real. And in that moment, I knew I had been wrong about everything. He looked at me with eyes that seemed to hold the age of the earth and said, "You've studied what men are allowed to see. Now let me show you what you were never told to look for." And then he said something I never expected. "Let's begin with the ice." What he revealed next would shake my understanding of earth and eternity forever. When Jesus said, "Let's begin with the ice," I felt something shift inside me. I had spent my life drilling, mapping, documenting Antarctica's depths. But now, standing beside the one who created it, I realized how little I truly knew. In an instant, he brought me into a vision. I was hovering above the continent, but this was no satellite image. This was truth. The veil was pulled back. I saw beyond the white emptiness portrayed on maps. I saw structures, boundaries, and a massive ring of towering ice, not random, but designed. Then Jesus said, "What lies at the edges of man's world was never meant to be owned, only revealed." He took me down through layers of ancient ice, deeper than any core sample had reached. We passed preserved forests, fossils of giants, and vast subterranean chambers. I saw a realm locked in, time untouched, unstudied, guarded, and then I saw something I still struggle to describe. A wall, miles high, endless, like a frozen fortress, around the edge of a world we never fully understood. And in my spirit, I heard the word, boundary. I turned to Jesus, stunned. "Is the earth not what we think it is?" He replied, "What men call discovery is often the redrawing of fences I placed long ago." He showed me explorers who came close, but turned back. Scientists silenced. Footage erased. Whole expeditions erased from history, not by governments, but by spirits of deception that ruled the age of man. Then he said, "The ice bears witness to creation, to judgment, to a time that is coming again." I saw flashes, waters breaking forth, as in the days of Noah, ice melting where no sun touched, creatures awakening beneath what men called uninhabitable. And then I saw angels stationed along the wall, watchers, sentinels, not the kind from children's books, but radiant beings wielding light like fire. "There are places man was never meant to conquer," Jesus said, "because they were not built for his glory, but for mine." I asked, "Then why let us come so close?" He answered, "Because you were meant to know, but not control." And then he looked at me, and with power in his voice, said, "Now, come, let me show you why the ice is waking, and what's coming when it does." And what I saw next unraveled everything I believed about Earth's future. Jesus and I stood before the colossal ice wall. It glistened like crystal, towering beyond comprehension. But what chilled me more than the sight was the sound. From deep within the ice, I heard groaning, not of cracks or shifting plates, something more alive. Jesus turned to me and said, "The earth groans not because of pollution, but because of prophecy." I. Well, I. And then he showed me a vision. I saw the polar caps melting, but not from heat, from judgment, from a countdown that had been set in motion long ago. I saw creatures once frozen in silence begin to stir. Not monsters, not myths, beings from a forgotten age. Jesus whispered, "The ice holds more than fossils. It holds testimony of what was and what must soon come again." Then, he showed me what humanity would say. They'd call it climate change. They'd blame carbon. They'd issue reports and charts, but none of it would explain what was truly being released. Because beneath that ice, I saw gateways. Ancient, sealed places, caverns deeper than Mariana, some technological, some spiritual. And in one of them, I saw an object, massive, dark, pulsing. Jesus said, "That is not man's creation. That is what man was warned never to touch." I saw research bases some secret, some public drawing nearer to this forbidden zone. Satellites had seen things they could not explain. Some scientists believed, most were silenced. And then, I saw what happens when they go too far. Jesus allowed me to witness a moment in the near future. I saw an international team breaching one of these vaults beneath the ice. They celebrated, documented it, sent footage to their governments. But what they awakened wasn't ancient life. It was ancient rebellion. Jesus said, "The days of Noah are returning. And just as in those days, the earth will split open its secrets." I watched as spiritual darkness began to risen, not metaphorical, but real, manifesting. Entities older than empires, deception, cloaked in discovery. And then he said, "Tell them, the melting is not just science. It is a signal." Then he looked at me with urgency and said, "Come, I will show you why the nations watch Antarctica more than they admit, and what they fear will be found." What I saw next proved just how far governments have already gone. When Jesus said, "Let me show you why the nations watch Antarctica," I felt a weight press into my soul. I had worked under international research grants. I'd signed non-disclosure agreements. I thought I knew the limits of what was real. I was wrong. He took me into a vision not just of ice, but of activity beneath the ice. I saw bases, tunnels, technology, not theoretical, not conspiracy, real. Massive chambers had been carved under the southern ice. Secret labs, energy systems, excavation zones. Nations that claimed neutrality were operating deep in the white silence together. Jesus said, "They say they come for peace, but they gather because they fear what's beneath." I saw files classified, labeled with words like anomalous biosignatures, non-human architecture, and containment breach. These weren't fantasy. These were documents stamped, time-stamped, and buried in sealed archives. He showed me satellite images never made public, structures in geometric patterns, power readings in zones, declared uninhabitable, an entire grid hidden under what the world called empty ice. And then I saw something even more disturbing, a global agreement. Dozens of nations sworn to secrecy, not out of unity, but control. They knew what was buried. They knew something ancient stirred beneath the poles, and their greatest fear was the world finding out. Jesus said, what they discovered was not evolution's secret. It was judgment's evidence. Then, I saw ancient texts ignored for centuries suddenly being studied by intelligence agencies. Passages from Enoch, echoes of Genesis 6, references to giants, to watchers, to a time when heaven and earth collided in rebellion. He said, the walls of ice were given not just to preserve, but to contain. Then, I saw a future momenta, desperate attempt to break through a sealed vault beneath the South Pole. The ice shook, the ground split, and something stepped out. Not a creature, a presence. Jesus turned to me, his face fierce and burning, and said, the earth is not ready for what they are awakening, but my people must be. He paused. Then he said, come, I will now show you how this all ties back to Genesis, and why the old days are coming again. And what I saw next? It explained every buried secret I had ever glimpsed in my career, and why it was hidden. Jesus looked at me with eyes that burned like the beginning of time itself and said, you've studied Earth's layers. Now let me show you the first fracture. And suddenly, we were moving faster than thought into a realm I can only describe as before history. Not prehistoric, pre-fall, the world as it was before the corruption. I saw beauty, earth untouched, skies more vivid than any sunrise I'd seen, creatures in harmony, man in creation, walking in step with heaven. But then I saw it break, not with war, but with pride. And from that pride came the descent of beings, watchers, angels who left their place. I saw them descend with glory, wisdom, brilliance, and rebellion. They brought knowledge man was not ready for. Architecture, weapons, energies, and something else. Genetic corruption. Jesus said, the giants were not myths. They were the fruit of union between heaven's rebels and earth's daughters. I saw the Nephilim, towering, violent, not merely strong possessed. They ruled, consumed, corrupted, and when man cried out, heaven answered, with flood. I saw the waters break from the deep, but then Jesus showed me something I never expected. The flood washed the earth, but I sealed what could not yet be destroyed. And then I saw it, the ice, rising, encasing not just terrain, but the remnants of rebellion, preserving the judgment, locking in evidence, freezing a warning for the last days. Antarctica is not forgotten, Jesus said. It is a tomb and a trumpet. Then he showed me how every culture carried echoes of this story. Sumerian tablets, Egyptian myths, Norse legends, all pointing back to a time when gods walked among men, and he whispered, they were not gods. They were prisoners on borrowed time. I saw governments decode ancient languages. I saw archaeologists uncovering bones that didn't fit evolution. I saw pieces of technology that defied explanation locked in ice, marked with symbols man had forgotten how to read. And Jesus said, when the final shaking begins, the ice will no longer hide them. He turned to me, voice grave. Now, I will show you why Satan fears this generation, and how he plans to use what's buried to deceive the whole world. And what I saw next explained why the truth is being rewritten and why we are running out of time. Jesus stood beside me in that realm of timeless vision, and his voice grew more serious, more urgent. What lies beneath the ice is not just history. It is a weapon, a deception crafted for the last hour. I asked him, why now? Why is it being uncovered in our time? He looked at me and said, because this generation carries the final resistance, and Satan knows his time is short. Then he showed me the enemy's plan. I saw elite figures, political, scientific, even religious, already preparing to reintroduce the old lies. But this time, they wouldn't call them myths. They'd call them discoveries. Ancient intelligence, off-world visitors. They would package rebellion as revelation, and the world would worship it. I saw headlines declaring, proof we are not alone. I saw museums filled with artifacts pulled from beneath the ice. I saw a global movement rise uniting science, spirituality, and technology under a new truth that humanity was seeded by higher beings. Jesus said, "The Nephilim will be rebranded as saviors, the Watchers as teachers, and my creation will forget its creator." Then he showed me how it would be tied to Antarctica, a massive global event, a broadcast, a revelation, a staged unveiling of something buried, a message from the past with a demonic fingerprint. I saw scientists praising the find, religions folding into a new belief system, and children growing up in a world where Jesus was just another story, but the gods beneath the ice were now revered. And then Jesus showed me the church. Some stood firm, some fell fast. Those who knew the word, those who walked in presence, discerned the lie, but many others, obsessed with relevance and power, embraced the deception. This, Jesus said, is why I'm awakening voices now, because the time is coming when silence will cost more than ridicule. It will cost souls. He looked at me with such intensity, I felt undone. "You were never supposed to die, Caleb, but I let you come here to see, so that you would go back and speak." I asked him, trembling, "What do I say?" He said, "Say what you saw. Say that the ice was a witness. Say that my return is near, and that the enemy's last deception is not a war of nations, but a war over truth." Then he said, "There's one more thing I must show you, the moment of my return, and what happens when the final seals break." And what I saw next was the end of hiding and the beginning of glory. Jesus lifted his hand, and everything around us began to tremble, not in fear, but in reverence. I could feel the earth itself responding, as if all of creation knew what was coming next. He looked at me and said, "Now I will show you what happens when the last seals break." And then I saw the end, but not destruction the way movies show it. I saw a great revealing, as if heaven was being poured onto earth, and everything hidden was now seen. The skies split not with fire, but with light. Pure, unstoppable, divine light. I saw the Antarctic ice wall shaking, groaning, cracking open, not just melting, splitting, and from beneath them came not monsters, but memories. The history man tried to bury, the sins of the Watchers, the remnants of rebellion, released. But in the midst of it, I saw him, Jesus, descending not as teacher, not as servant, but as king. And the earth itself responded, mountains bowed, oceans stilled, the sky rolled back like a scroll. I saw truth explode into every nation. People dropped their idols, phones, trophies, screens, statues. It didn't matter. When he appeared, nothing else held power. Not lies, not science, not secrets. Jesus whispered, "This is why the enemy fears your generation. Because you were born for this hour, to see the deception, to break the silence, to declare truth in a world of noise." I saw people running toward him. I saw revival, not emotionalism, but revelation. The veil was gone. Every soul knew who he was. But I also saw those who refused. Even as the sky broke open, some turned away, still clinging to enlightenment, still trusting in what was buried in ice, rather than what now stood in glory. And he said, "Their God was discovery, but I am the one who made the stars they studied." Tears streamed down my face. I didn't deserve to be here. I had mocked him. I had denied his existence. I had worshipped data over truth. But now, truth had a face. Then Jesus looked at me and said, "It is time. You must return." And as he reached toward me, I felt myself falling back through time, space, breath until I awoke in a hospital bed in Christchurch, New Zealand. 7 minutes had passed, but in those 7 minutes, I had seen the beginning, the end, and the truth beneath the ice. And I still had one thing left to say. When I opened my eyes in that hospital bed, My lungs gasped like they'd forgotten air. Nurses shouted. Alarms blared. My name echoed in voices I didn't recognize. But none of it mattered a lot compared to what I had just seen. They told me I flatlined for 7 minutes after a fall on the ice. But I know better. I was shown the edge of creation. I was shown Jesus. And I was shown what's coming. For days, I couldn't speak. When I finally did, I didn't talk about the accident. I talked about truth. I told them everything about the watchers, the deception, the sealed chambers, the crack in the Antarctic ice that's more spiritual than scientific. I told them what Jesus said. And now, I'm telling you, this world is being primed for a lie, a deception older than empires, dressed in discovery, branded as progress, marketed as awakening. They will say, we are not alone. They will say God's once walked among us. They will point to Antarctica, to ruins, to energy fields, and they will offer you a new truth without the cross. But Jesus is coming back. Not quietly, not as a mystery, but as King of Kings. And everything that's been hidden beneath the earth, beneath the sea, beneath the ice will answer to him. So here's my message. Don't chase the lie beneath the ice. Cling to the fire above it. Don't follow the signs. Follow his voice. He told me, the ice will melt, the world will wonder, but only my sheep will recognize the truth. I don't care if the world laughs. I saw him. I stood in front of him. And I know what he showed me was real. And now I live, for one reason, to tell as many as I can before the ice wall breaks. And the sky does too.